In Hellraiser 1, Clive Barker showed you his vision of a private hell. In Hellraiser 2, he took you on a journey inside the Inferno. Now, the terror returns in mankind's final confrontation with evil. And this time, it's going to be hell on Earth.
Great club. I really love it here.
Clive Barker presents Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
Well, the third film, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, right? So there was a big gap between that film and the second film. So what happened there? Was it...
What didn't?
Yeah.
Well, how long have you got? The short answer is New World went out of business.
Right.
There was another version of Hellraiser 3, completely different script, which, like Hellbound, it was exactly the same process. Clive and I had come up with the story together, and then I'd written script. We got greenlit from New World. We had pre-production when it released. We were in pre-production at Pinewood. In fact, big thrill for me was the storyboard artist was Mike Klug, who was a Marvel comic book guy who used to draw Werewolf at Night. And I was like, fucking hell, Mike Klug is drawing our storyboards. This is great. And then it just stopped because New World had gone bankrupt. And so not just our movie, every production New World had going was cancelled. It feels like it was literally that day, like put everything away, put everything back in the toy box and fuck off back to class. So that happened. And then I won't bore you with all. About 20 years ago, I wrote a long article for one of the film books about, I think there were 6 Hellraiser 3s.
Really?
And the one that became Hellraiser 3 wasn't the 6th. It was the 3rd or the 4th. So I won't bother you with anybody who wants to can look up this article. It's available online. If you really want to know the 6 stops and starts of the different takes on Hellraiser 3. But the one that we did was because Larry Coppin, who'd been one of the owners of New World, his share of the spoils when New World was divided up was the Hellraiser franchise. So he and Tony Randall, I hadn't mentioned this earlier, Tony had begun, well, not begun, he'd begun as a visual effects editor, but he'd transmutated into a suit. He'd been a development exec at New World. So Larry had been a lawyer, not a development guy, but Tony had known him. So Larry, saying, I own the Hellraiser franchise, calls the guy he knows, who is Tony, and said, do you want to make it Hellraiser? Now, bear in mind, this is 2.5 years after all the other Hellraiser 3s we might have been going to make. But this one was this one. And Tony, God bless him, said, well, yeah, I'll direct it as long as you get Pete Atkins to write it again, which was really nice of it. I mean, we were pretty close friends by then, so I would have been really fucking annoyed if he hadn't said it. But he didn't have to say it, and he did. But Larry Coppin could not come to financial terms with Clive, so Clive wasn't going to be involved with Hellraiser 3 at all, and in fact was not involved all the way through the shoot. At the end of the shoot, Miramax came in to distribute the movie, not to make it. They made Hellraiser 4, and boy, did they fuck that up. But they distributed Hellraiser 3, and as part of their promotion, they said, we want Clive Barker's name on this. So they came back to Clive and said, here's some money. Can we put Clive Barker Presents? And good for Clive. He's first of all good for Clive for being smart, because he said, yes, thank you very much, I'll take the money. But he also said, I'm not putting my name on, unless I can help. So during post-production, what would you say? He sat in with Tony Hickox while Tony was editing Hellraiser 3 and made, I'm sure, valuable and vital contributions. And also, and I think it was thanks to Clive that we got the opportunity to do a quick 5-day enhancement shoot in Los Angeles. We shot the movie in North Carolina, and I think the Los Angeles enhancement shoot about 6 months later, I think that, as Clive said, no, spend the money here. Let's make this bloodier or whatever. Clearly, I got in the middle of 3 different stories there. So, so that was the Hellraiser 3 that was eventually made was the 4th one, because what had happened after Tony and I had said yes, and after I'd been commissioned and paid and written a script, Larry Coppin's first distribution deal, I think with the then nascent Fangoria films, had fallen through. So it went back up in the air, and then so there were 2 other attempts in between, but then finally it reverted back, and Larry blah blah blah. So that's how we made Hellraiser 3 eventually, and that's why there was, I think you're right, was it literally 4 years, I guess?
4 years, yeah. It's 4 years.
Yeah. I think it was only 3 years between shooting, but yeah, by the time, yeah.
Were you pressured at all to get Pinhead back? Because obviously he was sort of destroyed in the second film, wasn't he? And he came back in the third.
I wouldn't use the word destroyed, Sean. He was freed. He was reminded of his human self by Ashley, the best final girl in horror movie history. She saves the monsters, not destroys them. But yes, then of course Chenard seems to zap him away. But the logic of this won't hold up at all. But I'll run it by you anyway.
Okay.
So when we knew that Claire wasn't willing to come back as Julia, we'd actually filmed her rising from the mattress in a fabulous black dress as Queen of Hell. But we then reshot that with the Pillar of Souls, with, as you may recall, Pinhead's face nailed to it. Not Doug Bradley's face, Jeff Portas's face, the makeup guy who applied. So when we started plotting Hellraiser 3, we figured that as a consequence of what Chenard had done, Pinhead 2 had been trapped in the Pillar of Souls. So Pinhead being Pinhead, he would of course become the dominant presence in the Pillar of Souls and could, like a sort of Punch and Judy show from hell, could talk to J.P. Monroe and say, feed me, and thus free himself. But the released ghost, the released spirit of Elliot Spencer, the soldier who became Pinhead, was out there as a ghost. So the Pinhead in the box, so to speak, was just an even creepier, nastier, literally soulless Pinhead. And the movie was kind of the soul versus the body, the person that used to be Pinhead versus Pinhead Unbound. So that was how we got around hang on, we've killed our monster. Because I don't think we necessarily thought when we did the Pillar, we were just like thinking on our feet, because as I say, it was meant to be Julia. So I'd like to say that we all thought, Pinhead's face must be on the Pillar, because we'll use him as the trigger. We'll use that as the trigger for the third movie. I don't think we thought it through that much. It was just like, obviously if you're having a pillar of hell's shit rising out of the you're going to put Pinhead's face on it. So, and seriously, I think it was just that. Thank God we did. Otherwise, we'd have had to come up with an even more convoluted and pathetic version. No, we didn't really kill him. What happened was, yeah. So that was why. That was why and how.
Well, we got to see some new Cenobites, didn't we, in that film as well? Were they quite fun to think up?
Yeah, sort of. CD Head has taken on his own sort of meme life out there in the Twitterverse, and how were we to know that technology was going to be obsolescent within 10 years? As I have said before in my defense, they weren't real Cenobites.
Yeah.
These were not creatures from hell. This unbound Pinhead, the monster released from the box, he literally says to Joey, beautifully played by Terry Farrell, our lead, he says to her at one point, they're handmade shadows of my former troops. So they weren't meant to be cool. Although, the fire-breathing one was pretty cool, right? The barbed wire Cenobite, yeah, he was cool. He was real cool. For people who don't understand, I played that one. So yeah, I think Camera Head and CD Head were very much of their time, which was the 80s. And as I've said, before I say anything else, actually, I should, as I've said before in a couple of podcasts, and it's not the first time since we lost him, but Tony Hickox, who directed Hellraiser 3, sadly died last year. Younger than all of us. Well, not all of us. I mean, you're younger than me, Clive, Doug, and Randall. And, movie royalty. His dad was Douglas Hickox, who directed Theatre of Blood with Vincent Price and Diana.
Okay, yeah.
And his mom was Anne Coates, who was David Lean's editor. She edited Lawrence of Arabia, won an Oscar. So, Tony didn't win an Oscar for Hellraiser 3. Don't know why. Can't understand the oversight. But we did lose him last year, and that was very sad because I was very lucky. Most writers, as I'm sure, screenwriters, are bitch about their directors. And I was very lucky. I got on great. To this day, I'm still very close friends with Tony Randall. Was very close friends with Tony. He'd moved back to Europe 9 or 10 years ago, so we hadn't lost touch, but we weren't in constant touch. But had a great relationship with him. He and I co-wrote about 10 scripts together, and in a sort of classic Hollywood irony, gives with one hand. We sold all of them. We were paid for all of them, and none of them got made. Because you can make a living as a screenwriter without. I mean, eventually they'll catch up with you. Well, none of them got produced. Maybe he sucks. But so it paid the rent for several years. None of them got made except one, and the one that got made they completely fucked up, and it's the most irredeemable piece of shit. So it's just a horrible irony that the last after Hellraiser 3, the only time Tony Hickox and I, not Tony Ryan, is confusing. There are two Tonys, but the only other on-screen on a finished film credit that Tony Hickox and I had together was on this piece of shit called Prisons of the Sun. But weirdly, it was, after Tony died, somebody sent me frame grabs from Prisons of the Sun with our credit on. And it was, you sort of forgot how awful the movie was. it was just moving to say, oh, God, yeah, there's me and my mate who we just lost. Why did I get off on that time? Hellraiser 3. Oh, yeah, this is what I was going to say. And I wanted to preface it with a heartfelt eulogy to Tony, who was a fucking wild man. I mean, in a way, we should always have known he was going to die youngish. He was over 60, but he never let the party stop. Tony, he was an 80s guy, and I think Hellraiser 3 is an 80s movie. And I'm sorry to repeat myself on your podcast because I think I've said this bit. Well, I've said most of it before on the podcast, to be honest. But the thing about Hellraiser 3 is I know that a lot of hardcore Hellraiser fans, it's the one they like. They usually like the four theatrical ones, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They like more than most of the direct-to-video ones, with the possible exception of 3, which a lot of them do not care for, because it has a different tone and a different pace and style and flavor. So what I do is I sidestep it. I don't try to defend it as a good Hellraiser movie, but I do think it's a good 80s horror movie. I think it's very much an 80s horror movie. If you look at it, it's got the sort of the MTV rapid cut energy, the heavy metal band in the club. We get, Lemmy to sing Hellraiser in the closing credits. So that was great. So I think, and I think things like the camera head and CD head are very 80s flavored.
Yeah.
But, they're probably not in the pantheon of Cenobitic demons. And weirdly, I mean, I know I made a joke about it earlier, and obviously I speak from a position of prejudice because it's me, but I was very lucky, I guess, that the mask, the pre-made mask that fit me was the one with the barbed wire, because I do think, again, prejudice, I do think my Cenobite of the Ersat Cenobites is the least unlike the real Cenobites.
Yeah.
So, so. But Ken Carpenter, who had a proper role in the movie as Doc, the cameraman who worked with Joey, and was then camera head himself, and Eric Wilhelm, who played CD head. He hadn't played the DJ who became CD head. That was Brent Bolthouse, but Eric wore the costume and threw the discs. And I think Ken and Eric did a great job, and I still get a kick out of seeing the shot of the three of us walking down the street fighting cops on the streets of New York, which wasn't New York. It was High Point, North Carolina, for you completists. So I certainly don't want to badmouth Ken or Eric's commitment to Sat Cenobite roles that they were playing. But yet, even though Hellraiser 4 Bloodline is a terrible mess, and I'm certainly a lot less happy with the finished result than I am with number 3, you do get a lot of Hellraiser fans who, despite its mixed production history, they prefer Hellraiser 4 to Hellraiser 3 because it feels more like whatever in their heads a Hellraiser movie should feel like. Hellraiser 4 feels more like a Hellraiser movie to them than Hellraiser 3 did.